Welcome to the Iron Will podcast, where we talk about overcoming adversity and challenges, creating the life we truly want, and how we use iron therapy to improve our mind and body. No matter what life throws at us, we need to develop an iron will to push through whatever stands in the way to becoming the very best version of ourselves. It's never too late, but now is the time for action. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Iron Will podcast, episode 209, Getting Through the Tough Days. So obviously, if you guys have been listening to the last few episodes, you're well aware that we've had some big changes, closing the training facility, pushing and launching Iron Hoss gear, winding down a business, change of pace, changing direction, breaking some cycles. There's been a lot going on in the last 120 days or so. And you know, no matter how positive anyone tries to be, including myself, we're going to have some tough days. We're going to have days where maybe it just doesn't end the greatest and then it flows into the next day and we still have to get through it. So like everybody else, I too have bad days, and especially, dealing with some of the stuff that I'm dealing with, there's a little bit more of the bad days or the tough days than I would like. But that's change. That's the challenge of pivoting and making some big life changes that are deep and that cut and that have a big effect. So it's to be expected. At the same time, though, not always easy to deal with. And we can sit there and say that, no matter what, I'm going to turn into it and I'm going to face it and I'm going to deal with it. And I think that's what we want to be doing. I think ideally that's how we want to face every challenge. But there's times too where we just get tired of getting punched in the face and we feel like we need a break. But, we still have to get through the day. And I know the challenge for me always is to try to snap out of that negative mindset that comes with the challenges and the tough days, And, one of this episode's coming is just because last night I didn't like the way my day ended. A couple things came up, some personal stuff, and it just really upset me. Now, at the same time, I'm realizing it's upsetting me, and I'm trying to triage my emotions at the same time. I'm trying to deal with how much do I let this bother me right now? How much of it can I control? How much of it can I not control? Right? And then how much time do I give myself to be upset? Because I don't think you should turn around and just never be upset. I don't think you should become a computer where you just have no emotion. I think we have to look at what's happening, what's causing this, what can we change about it right away, what can we not change about it, and then understand that sometimes we just have to absorb it and take it in, and just let it happen. I never like when a day ends poorly because I find I have trouble sleeping, and then I find it starts off the next day is always on a negative. And I'm bringing some of that stuff forward, especially if I wasn't able to resolve some of it. And a lot of times if you're having issues and it's not just yourself, if it's with another person, if it's with a situation, there's other people, other circumstances involved, you don't have a lot of the control. So at the end of the day, that's always my struggle. How do I keep working on that? How do I get better at it? How do I sit there and say, all right, this is just going to sting and I just got to suck it up, and then try to figure out ways to deal with the anger or the frustration or the sadness or whatever negative emotions coming out. Is it going for a drive? Is it going for a walk? Is it reading a book? Is it coming downstairs, and watching some TV? Is it, what's the appropriate response? What's the right way to deal with it? Because it's quite easy, and I know for myself, to fester, to have the thoughts keep running, and then to pull things up from the past and go and get reinforcements for these negative feelings, right? And if I feel another part of my nature is that I want things done now, I want things resolved now, is I just fight that urge to have everything resolved right away. And some things just can't be resolved right away. And for me, some of the balancing act is, what are acceptable things? What are my standards that I'm willing to accept and not accept in relationships, in business dealings, in my own level of activity? What am I not willing to accept any further? What am I willing to cave on. And I don't like to use the word cave, but what am I willing to accept and to try to, deal with? What's acceptable? Where can I give a little bit? I guess that's the better word I'm looking for. And is giving in, is that quitting? Is that giving up? Or is it saying, hey, listen, not everything's going to be a straight line, and we're going to have to deviate. We're going to have to move around. We're going to have to, adjust our course sometimes, always with the end result in mind. And for me, that's the challenge. I find, especially now that I've made some big changes, I'm setting higher standards for myself, what I want to achieve in business, what I want to achieve personally, what I want to achieve physically, health-wise, spiritually, relationship-wise. And that's the hard part with setting higher standards or trying to maintain higher standards for yourself, is that sometimes you have to fight for those standards. And that's going to cause some friction. And that's going to cause some stress and some anger and some sadness. Because not everyone and everything is going to be on board. Not everyone and everything is going to like your new standards. If everyone was used to things being a certain way, I know one of the challenges for us at home is, in the last 12 weeks, I've been home more often in the last 12 weeks than I have in the last 15 years. It's weird for everybody. It's weird for my wife. It's weird for my kids. Because for so many years, I wasn't home. Having a gym and a retail, coming home at 10, 11, 12 o'clock was the norm. Not seeing much of each other till the weekend. And then the weekends being super busy with kids' activities, events, all kinds of stuff. Now, I knew for me, for the last while, I was no longer happy with that. I wanted a better home life for myself, for my family. So that was one of the reasons I made the decision I did to change the businesses, to change the focus. But those changes are difficult. Just even if it's the most positive situation and the most positive reasons, it's going to take time for everyone to get used to it, including yourself. And when it's new, we got to fight and figure out, what is it that we want? What does it look like? I know I want a better standard for certain things, but what is that going to look like? What's that going to feel like on a Tuesday? What does that look like on a Saturday morning? How are conversations held between individuals when you're changing your standards? That's going to lead you to more tough days. And that's where I'm at. How do I deal with those tough days? Because I do believe that some of these tough days that are here, I brought upon myself, or I'm bringing upon myself because I'm looking to change things, to shake the status quo, to break the cycle. So I know the logical part in my mind knows that there's going to be some rough patches. Standing up for your standards, standing up for yourself, wanting things to be better, you're going to have to fight for it. You have to fight yourself. You're going to have to fight people around you, your inner circle, your outer circle, the world. And that's not going to be easy. And it's easy to want to back down. It's easy to want to, focus on something else. It's easy to sit there and say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. But I personally don't want to do that anymore. And then we got to balance that with our energy. How much can we handle today? How much can we work on today? What can we do? We fight to keep moving forward, but some days we lose a little bit of ground. Some days we only move an inch. And it took a tremendous amount of effort to move that inch. And then some days we move a mile and it seemed like it was easy. It's quite often an emotional roller coaster. And I think that's why it's so important to prepare ourselves to be healthier physically, exercise, be fitter, eat better. It's important to be better, stronger mentally. Read, rituals, self-care. Control the thoughts we have in our head, the scripts we run in our mind. Because that's really what's going to set the base for how we're dealing with things. What I don't want to have happen is to have a negative effect, a negative thing come up, an argument, a discussion, a failed attempt at something, a no. I don't want that to turn around and to start to cause a spiral, because it can deflate you pretty quickly. You could have nine yeses in a row and you get one no, and you could fester over that one no and forget about the victory of the 9 other yeses. because it means something to us. What we're working on, when we're trying to make changes, when we're trying to grow and adapt and improve, it means a lot to us. So we're very vulnerable. We're hypersensitive at first, or maybe always, I don't know. And maybe that's part of the skill, dealing with that sensitivity. We're often afraid to go after what we want because we are afraid of what it's going to cost us, how much work it's going to be. And we have to remind ourselves, I know I have to remind myself that it's still less painful than living with regret. And then sometimes we just have to sit there and say, you know what, this is a shitty situation that we have to deal with. And it might not go away today. It might not go away this week. It might be something that's ongoing. It might not be something we can ever resolve. So we have to make other decisions. And sometimes that scares the shit out of us. But getting through the tough days, I think, is more important than cruising through the good days. Because I said earlier, the negativity, the roadblocks we run into are the ones that we think about the most. We forget about the victories. We focus on the losses, the perceived loss. I hate getting a no. I hate getting a no for anything that's important to me that I want to do. But I have to understand that that's just the way things are. Not everything's going to be a hell yes. You might be excited about it. You might want it. But the person, the situation, the business, whatever you're dealing with, might not feel that at all. They're on a different page. What's important to you might not be important to them at all. And sometimes that's a little scary to deal with, especially if it's something on a relationship level, on a personal level. We're afraid to face that. We're afraid to deal with that. We're afraid to what would be the eventual outcome of that. And that's the crazy thing about fear, is that fear rarely manifests itself to be what we think it's going to be. It's never as bad as we think it's going to be. But when we're knee deep in the rice paddies and we're feeling it and we're raw and we're emotional and we're upset, we're mad, we're angry, we're sad, we're hurt, whatever those negative points are, we lose sight of that logical thinking. We all have that friend that gives the best advice ever, but their life's a fucking train wreck because they have trouble following their own advice. We have trouble following our own advice because it's not easy, because we're vulnerable. When it's us that's involved, we feel like there's more at stake. So to me, the tough days are going to come. The tough days are going to happen. What we need to do is figure out how we're going to get through it, how much of it we're willing to accept, how much of the pain are we willing to absorb and say, hey, that's just the pain of the situation, and how much are we willing to say, and that's enough. I don't want to feel this again. I don't want this to happen again, so I have to make some changes. I have to keep raising or fighting for those higher standards. But things around us are going to have to change for that. We're going to have to change for that. That circle of five we've talked about many times. Who we hang out with, who we spend our time with, that's going to have to change. Because we want to change. We want to evolve. At the end of the day, all of us have to struggle through the tough days and understand that no matter how well we have our shit together, there's going to be tough days. Sometimes when we haven't had tough days in a long time and we get confronted with one, we're lost because we haven't had to deal with it in a long time. Maybe never, some people. Who knows? It's a skill that we have to acquire. It's a toughness and a hardness that we have to acquire as well, too, to say, listen, yes, this sucks. What's the greater good? What am I trying to achieve here? What's the big picture? Those are things that we have to hang on to in the tough days. And then we have to have some activities that we do, like I said, ways that we think, activities that we can to do once we recognize that we're in the middle of a tough day. Is it having a further conversation? Is it about going to see someone who has more of an expertise in a situation that you're dealing with? Is it as simple as going to have a workout, going for a walk? There's a time where it is okay just to turn on the TV and lose yourself a little bit and be entertained by what's on the screen. Sometimes we just need a little break. What we do want to make sure that doesn't happen, though, is that we don't get so used to avoiding that we never deal with the situation. But tough days are going to happen. Tough times are going to happen. And we have to figure out a way for ourselves that works for us to get through them. And then if we can learn some lessons along the way to avoid putting ourselves in those situations again, I think that's really important. But we're not going to be able to avoid tough days altogether. There's just too many influences around us, too many moving parts. Our life is never going to be perfect. We're never going to be able to set it up in such a way that we never run into this. So it's a skill set we need to acquire. It's a time and a place that we need to recognize. Today isn't going well. This conversation is not going well. How do I get my point across? How do I be heard? And understand that at the end of my conversation or the end of my statement, that not necessarily is it going to be resolved. That's the tough part. And that's, I think, our job is to find a way to work through this, figure this out. How do I do this? How do I get better at this? What works for me? But always with, I believe, the desire for the outcome to be positive and moving towards your goal. And if we do that, we're going to end up figuring it out. As long as we don't quit, as long as we don't overreact. That's the hard part sometimes, especially if it's really emotional for us, is not to overreact. And we don't want to underreact either, though. We don't want to sit there and accept things that we don't want to accept. So navigating through that, that's my challenge. I think that's all our challenge. Guys, that's all I have to say for that. Head on over to iTunes. I don't even know how that works anymore. You just like and review it then and there. I have no clue what's happening over there. But if you happen to be on iTunes, give us a thumbs up or a 5-star rating, or I don't know how that works anymore. We'll look into that. Head on over to ironhossgear.com. Use the code word IRONHOSS to get 20% off some really cool stuff. Luke's looking at me. Yes, I made that discount code. Didn't I?
Isn't it Iron Will?
Yes, Iron Will. Testing everybody. I have to test Luke sometimes. Head on over to Iron Hoss Gear. Use the code word IRONWILL to save 20% off on some really cool merch. As always, guys, I'll talk to you guys later.